Most fans are looking at this match and seeing something relatively simple: a group stage game. A host nation against a traditionally stubborn South American side. 90 minutes, 3 points. Move on. But World Cups have a habit of turning ordinary matches into something far more complicated. Because sometimes a game isn't decided by quality. Sometimes it isn't decided by tactics. Sometimes it isn't even decided by talent. Sometimes it is decided by pressure. And pressure has a way of transforming everything. That is what makes USA versus Paraguay so fascinating. Not because one team is clearly better, not because one team is expected to dominate, but because this feels like the kind of match that could change shape several times before the final whistle. The kind of match where one moment creates another, and another, and another, until nobody recognizes the game they thought they were watching. At first glance, the United States enters with obvious advantages. They are playing on home soil. They understand the environment. They know the expectations. They know millions of people will be watching. And that support can be a powerful weapon, but support can also become a burden. Because every host nation discovers the same thing eventually. The crowd wants confidence. The crowd wants control. The crowd wants goals. And when those things don't arrive quickly, anticipation slowly becomes anxiety. That is where this story begins. Because the United States is not only playing Paraguay, they may also be playing the weight of expectation. Every pass will be analyzed. Every mistake will feel larger. Every missed opportunity will be amplified. The atmosphere that lifts a team can also tighten it. And Paraguay knows this. They have spent decades building a football identity around discomfort. Not necessarily beauty, not necessarily dominance. Discomfort. The ability to drag opponents into battles they did not want. The ability to make talented teams question themselves. The ability to turn confidence into frustration. And frustration changes matches. That is why this game feels dangerous, because both teams arrive carrying different forms of pressure. The United States is expected to perform, Paraguay is expected to disrupt, and somewhere between those expectations lies chaos. What makes this even more interesting is the tournament context surrounding the match. Group stage games are often treated as opening chapters, but they rarely stay that way. One result can completely transform a group's psychology. A victory creates freedom. A defeat creates urgency. A draw can create uncertainty. Players know this, coaches know this, fans know this. And because everyone knows it, the pressure starts long before kickoff. The United States will understand that a strong start can generate momentum throughout the tournament. Momentum is one of football's most mysterious forces. You cannot measure it perfectly, you cannot touch it. Yet entire tournaments have been shaped by it. One positive performance becomes belief. Belief becomes confidence. Confidence becomes courage. And courage changes how players behave in critical moments. But momentum works both ways. A nervous performance can create doubts. Doubts create hesitation. And hesitation is often all an opponent needs. Paraguay enters this match with a completely different opportunity. Nobody expects them to carry the emotional burden of hosting. Nobody expects them to entertain millions of home supporters. That freedom can be powerful. Because teams with less pressure often make clearer decisions. They remain patient longer, they stay disciplined longer, and they wait for mistakes. The question is whether the United States can handle the emotional demands that come with being the center of attention. Because history suggests that host nations rarely experience normal matches. Every game becomes bigger. Every moment becomes louder. Every setback feels heavier. And that brings us to the first scenario that could completely transform this contest. Imagine the United States scores early. Everything changes immediately. The crowd erupts. Energy floods through the stadium. Players suddenly feel lighter. Passes become sharper. Runs become more aggressive. Confidence grows. But an early goal does more than help the United States. It forces Paraguay into a difficult decision. Do they remain patient, or do they abandon their original plan? That decision alone could reshape the entire match. Because Paraguay is at its most dangerous when games remain controlled, when emotions stay manageable, when opponents slowly become impatient. An early American goal threatens all of that. Suddenly, Paraguay must chase moments instead of managing them. Spaces appear, transitions become faster, the game becomes more open, and open games often become unpredictable games. But there is another possibility, one that may be even more dramatic. What if Paraguay scores first? Now, the pressure reverses instantly. The crowd becomes quieter. Every American attack feels urgent. Every missed chance feels costly. And urgency has consequences. Teams begin forcing passes. Players attempt riskier decisions. Defenders push higher. Midfielders abandon patience. Structure starts disappearing. That is often when football becomes chaotic. Not because one team is playing brilliantly, but because one team begins chasing the game emotionally. And emotional football creates opportunities in unexpected places. Paraguay understands this better than most. They know how dangerous anxiety can be. They know how quickly frustration can spread across a stadium. One uncomfortable half hour can feel like an eternity when expectations are high. The fascinating part is that both teams could benefit from entirely different versions of the same match. The United States may want rhythm. Paraguay may want disruption. The United States may want control. Paraguay may want uncertainty. And uncertainty is where tournaments often produce their most memorable moments. Most fans will naturally focus on attacking stars. Goals attract attention. Highlights attract attention. Big names attract attention. But another battle may prove more important. The battle over emotional control. Because football matches are rarely played at a constant temperature. Emotions rise, emotions fall, confidence rises, confidence falls. The team that manages those shifts often gains an invisible advantage. Imagine a missed penalty. Imagine a controversial foul. Imagine a goal ruled out by VAR. None of those moments change the score immediately, but they can completely alter the emotional landscape. And emotional landscapes decide matches more often than people realize. Which brings us to another scenario that could send this game in a completely unexpected direction. A refereeing controversy. World Cups are filled with moments that divide opinion. A penalty appeal, a red card debate, a marginal offside decision. The modern game adds another layer through VAR, the wait, the uncertainty, the suspense. Those few minutes can feel endless. And while fans focus on screens and replays, players are left dealing with something much more dangerous. Distraction. Concentration breaks, momentum stalls, or frustration builds. And when play resumes, the emotional state of both teams may be entirely different. One side feels wronged, the other feels relieved. That imbalance can influence everything that follows, not tactically, psychologically. And psychology may be the most important battle of all, because this match contains several players who thrive on confidence. Give them belief and they become difficult to stop. Take away belief and the game becomes harder. The challenge is that confidence is fragile. One mistake can damage it. One brilliant moment can restore it. One crowd reaction can change it. The margins are incredibly small, and that is why predicting this match feels so difficult. Not because the teams are impossible to analyze, but because football rarely follows clean narratives. A match that appears balanced can suddenly become wild. A match expected to be wild can become cautious. The smallest trigger can alter everything. There is also a tactical story unfolding beneath the surface. The United States often looks strongest when opponents are forced to react, when movement creates uncertainty, when defenders must make difficult choices, when the game accelerates. Paraguay often thrives when those choices become uncomfortable, when attacks are slowed, when momentum is interrupted, when opponents are forced to earn every meter of space. These approaches naturally collide, and collisions create tension. The interesting question is not which style is better. The interesting question is which style appears first. If the United States establishes tempo early, Paraguay may spend large portions of the game defending situations they would rather avoid. But if Paraguay succeeds in slowing the rhythm, the match begins moving in a completely different direction. Suddenly, frustration becomes a factor. Patience becomes a factor. Decision-making becomes a factor. And once again, pressure enters the conversation. Pressure always finds a way back into World Cup matches, especially when expectations are involved. The longer a game remains unresolved, the heavier every moment becomes. A misplaced pass feels larger. A missed chance feels larger. A defensive error feels larger. Time itself begins affecting behavior, which leads to perhaps the most fascinating scenario of all, a level match entering the final 20 minutes. Imagine the score remains tied. Now neither team is certain how much risk to take. One mistake could destroy everything. One moment of bravery could change everything. This is where tournament football becomes unique, because teams stop thinking only about the current moment. They start thinking about consequences, group standings, future opponents, qualification scenarios. The bigger picture enters every decision, and that creates hesitation or courage, sometimes both at the same time. A coach becomes more aggressive, a substitute changes the energy, a defender joins the attack, a midfielder takes an unexpected risk. The game begins stretching, and stretched games often produce chaos, counterattacks, transitions, near misses, last-ditch tackles, moments that feel impossible to predict. That is why this matchup feels so dangerous for anyone expecting a straightforward contest. There are simply too many pathways toward unpredictability. An early goal changes everything. A surprise setback changes everything. A controversial decision changes everything. A late equalizer changes everything. A single mistake changes everything. And every one of those possibilities feels realistic. Perhaps the biggest hidden factor is opportunity, because tournaments are filled with players waiting for one defining
While
moment.
the football world is
One
busy
tackle,
talking about the
one
traditional
save,
giants,
one run, one
while
goal,
the headlines
one
focus on
performance.
those
Some matches are
qualities do
decided
not
by
always
superiority.
generate headlines.
Others are
They do
decided
not
by
always
survival.
create viral moments, but
This
they
one may
win
be decided
football
by
matches.
adaptability,
And more importantly,
by which team
they win
responds
tournament
best when the
matches.
script
Because
inevitably
tournaments
starts changing.
are different.
And if that
In
happens,
league football,
if emotions
talent
rise,
often
if
reveals
momentum
itself
swings,
over time.
if opportunities
Across a
appear
World
where
Cup,
nobody expected
small
them,
details become
then this
decisive.
could become one of the most
Discipline
unpredictable
matters,
games of the
structure
entire group
matters,
stage.
concentration matters.
Not because
One
chaos is
mistake can end a
guaranteed,
dream.
but
One
because the
lapse in
conditions
focus
for
can
chaos
change
are
everything.
everywhere.
South
And
Korea
that is what
understands
makes
this
this
reality,
matchup impossible
and
to
that
ignore.
understanding makes them dangerous.
The questions remain
Then
unanswered.
there is the question of
The
mentality.
pressure remains real.
Perhaps the most
The
underrated
possibilities
weapon
remain
in
endless.
international football.
And somewhere between
The teams that
expectation and
perform best
opportunity,
at World Cups
one of the
are
tournament's
rarely the
most
teams with the
fascinating
least
stories
pressure.
may be waiting to unfold.
They are usually the teams